Chapter 56, Conservation Biology and Restoration Ecology. An overview of the chapter. 1.8 million species have been named and described as of date. Biologists estimate that there are 10 to 200 million species exist on Earth. A lot of invertebrates, insects have not been named. Tropical forests contain some of the greatest concentrations of species, and as everyone knows, they are being destroyed at an alarming rate. And humans are rapidly pushing many species toward extinction. So, what will be the fate of this newly described bird species? Deforestation is a problem. Here's tropical deforestation in West Kalimantan in Indonesian province. So, what is the difference between conservation biology and restoration ecology? Well, conservation biology seeks to preserve life and integrate several fields of ecology, physiology, molecular biology, genetics, and evolutionary biology. Whereas restoration ecology applies ecological principles to return degraded ecosystems to conditions as similar as possible to their natural state. Some of these later on. So, a lot of human activities threaten the Earth's biodiversity. Rates of species extinction are difficult to determine under natural conditions. So it's, the high rate of species extinction is largely due to the ecosystem degradation by humans, and humans are threatening Earth's biodiversity. Here are 3 levels of biodiversity: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. So the oversized chromosomes in the top diagrams symbolize the general genetic variation within the population. So, genetic diversity in a vole population, species diversity in a coastal redwood ecosystem, and then community and ecosystem diversity across the landscape of an entire region. Genetic diversity is the genetic variation within a population, also between populations. Species diversity is a variation of species in an ecosystem and throughout the biosphere. So, according to the U.S. Endangered Species Act, there are endangered species and threatened species. The difference is endangered species is in danger of becoming extinct throughout all or a significant portion of its range, whereas a threatened species is likely to become endangered in the foreseeable future if steps aren't taken. Species loss. Conservation biologists are concerned about species lost because of alarming statistics regarding extinction. Globally, 12% of birds, 20% of mammals, 32% of amphibians are threatened with extinction. Fewer than 100 individuals remaining on Earth. Animals to the right. So, these 3 animals, 100 heartbeats from extinction. These are just 3 members of what E.O. Watson calls the 100 Heartbeat Club. Species with fewer than 100 individuals remaining on Earth. The Yangtze River dolphin was even thought to be extinct, but a few individuals reported sighted in 2007. So the Philippine eagle and the Javan. Ecosystem diversity. Human activity is reducing ecosystem diversity in a variety of ecosystems. More than 50% of wetlands in the contiguous U.S. have been drained and converted to other ecosystems. This picture is an endangered Marianos flying foxbat, and it is an important. So the benefit of species and genetic diversity in the United States, 25% of prescriptions contain substances originally derived from plants. For example, the rosy periwinkle contains alkaloids that inhibit cancer growth. And this is the rosy periwinkle here, a plant that saves lives. So the loss of a species also means loss of genes and genetic diversity. The enormous genetic diversity of organisms, of course, is essential for great human benefit. Ecosystem services encompass all the processes through which natural ecosystems and their species help sustain human life. So some examples are purification of air and water, detoxification and decomposition of waste, proper cycling of nutrients, and moderation of extremes. 3 threats to biodiversity. Most species loss, habitat destruction. Introduced species that are non-native, and over-exploitation, such as overfishing. Habitat loss. This is the greatest threat to biodiversity throughout the world, the biosphere. Almost all cases, habitat fragmentation, the habitats being cut up, and destruction lead to loss of biodiversity. For example, in Wisconsin, prairie occupies 0.1%, a tenth of a percent of its original area. Also, 93% of coral reefs have been damaged by human activities, because if you touch a living coral reef, that's why. Habitat fragmentation in the foothills of Los Angeles. Development in the valleys, as you can see here, may confine the organisms that inhabit the narrow strips of hillsides. Introduced species are those that humans move from native locations to new geographic species, new geographic regions, such as a lot of our ornamental plants that we buy. If the species name is japonica, like our Camellia japonica that blooms in the spring and does so well here in Richmond, is a non-native species. It was introduced from Japan, hence the name japonica. So without their native predators, parasites, and pathogens, introduced species sometimes spread rapidly, and they gain a foothold in the new habitat and usually disrupt their adopted community. So like a bad invasive introduced species would be kudzu, also from Japan, has taken over parts of the south. Sometimes humans introduce, here's a picture of kudzu, introduce species by accident, as in the case of the brown tree snake arriving in Guam as a cargo ship stowaway. So that is a mistake, unintentional, but humans have deliberately introduced some species with good intentions, such as kudzu, and it has had disastrous effects. It's very invasive. Grows quickly, covers everything in its path. Overexploitation is human harvesting of wild plants or animals at rates exceeding the ability of population of those species to rebound. So, overfishing is a big deal, particularly in Japan. Overexploitation by fishing industry has greatly reduced populations of some game fish, such as bluefin tuna. So this is North Atlantic bluefin tuna are auctioned in a Japanese fish market. The Japanese do not have as strict rules for overfishing as the United States does. DNA analysis can help conservation biologists to identify the source of illegally obtained animal products, such as poaching. Population conservation focuses on population size, genetic diversity, and critical habitat. Biologists focusing on conservation of the population and species level follow the small population approach and the declining population approach. The small population approach studies processes that make small populations become extinct. And then a small population is prone to positive feedback loops that draw it down an extinction vortex. The key factor driving this is the loss of genetic variation necessary to enable evolutionary responses to environmental change. So they're unable to respond to the environment through lack of genetic variation, so the species becomes extinct. Processes accumulating an extinction vortex. So there's a small population to begin with. Inbreeding, genetic drift results in loss of genetic variability. Therefore, reduction in individual fitness and population adaptability, which leads to lower reproduction and higher mortality, with the end result of a smaller population. Case study: populations of greater prairie chicken were fragmented by agriculture and later found to exhibit decreased fertility due to decreased genetic variation. So to test the extinction vortex hypothesis, scientists imported genetic variation by transplanting birds from a larger population, and the results are amazing. So here the declining population rebounded. So here's the number of male birds, decrease. Extinction vortex, almost to extinction. Translocation went down a little bit more for a couple years, and then the new genes introduced into the population increased the number of male birds. And here eggs hatched very low, but then in the next couple years the hatching rate rebounded with the increase, with the introduction of new genetic material. Minimum viable population size, MVP, is the minimum population size at which a species can survive, and it depends on factors that affect the population's chance of survival over a particular time. So MVP requires determining the effective population size, which is on the population's breeding potential. Case study: studying the grizzly bear population. One of the first population's viability analysis was conducted as a long-term study in Yellowstone National Park of grizzly bears. The grizzly bear population is at about 400, but the effective population size is only 100. The Yellowstone grizzly bear population has low genetic variability compared with other populations. So introducing individuals from other populations would increase the number and genetic variation. So this is this ecologist is fitting a tranquilized bear with a radio collar to do long-term monitoring of a grizzly bear population. So with this radio collar, the bear's movements can be compared with those of other individuals in the Yellowstone National Park population. The declining population approach focuses on threatened and endangered populations that show a downward trend, regardless of the population size. So emphasizes environmental that cause this decline. So the declining population approach involves several steps. Confirm that the population is declining. Study the species' natural history. Develop a hypothesis for all possible causes of decline, predation, weather, etc. Test the hypothesis in order of likeliness and apply the results of the diagnosis